Welcome to JA Economics for Success, My Income and Expenses. For this lesson, you will need the following materials, including your volunteer guidebook, the student worksheet for this session, as well as the student table temps, and you will also need to access the digital presentation that can be found at learn.ja.org. You can work with your classroom teacher to determine whether you or the teacher will be responsible for pulling up the digital presentation each time you visit the classroom. We recommend asking the teacher to have the presentation ready for you when you arrive, if possible. If you are teaching a JA in a day or a JA in the AM event, please know that JA staff have encouraged your teachers to have the presentation pulled up prior to you entering the classroom on the day of your event. To aid in preparation and facilitation, you'll see in the guidebook blue text boxes, which contain JA of South Dakota session-specific teaching tips, and yellow text boxes that include vocabulary terms and presentation content that is not already in the guidebook. When you first come into the classroom, please greet the students and tell them a bit about yourself and why you've chosen to volunteer in their classroom if this is your first visit with these students. If this is not your first lesson with the class, please redistribute their table temps as needed and remind them of what they learned in the previous lesson. As we move forward using the arrows found at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, we come to the objective slide. Please read through these with students as they emphasize what students should know or should be able to do by the end of the lesson. The slide suggests handing out the worksheet titled Planning for Expenses. You may choose to do so now or later as the worksheet is not needed until a later activity. The next slide showcases a few questions to prompt students to consider why people work. I suggest discussing this with students and then asking them to consider what kind of jobs they are personally interested in for their own future. From there, you could call on some students to share what they would like to be. Something I personally like to do is when students tell me what job they want, I pull out my phone and Google the average income for that position and share it with the class. I will do this for a few students before moving on to the next slide. I tell students that it's important to know what your income may be or have a target for an income amount that will sustain the lifestyle that they desire. If you are comfortable with doing so, you could even consider telling students what your role and your income is, or share incomes from your past jobs or perhaps your first job. As you advance through the slides, please notice that many of the slides, especially the vocabulary slides, are interactive. You can choose to have a student come up to the board to click and reveal the definition of each word, or you could have students guess the definition of the word, talk about what they think the word might mean, and they could do so individually, as a whole class, or with shoulder partners before revealing the definition of the word. The vocabulary words are buttons, so you just hover over the word income, for example, and you're going to click to reveal the definition. And then I'm going to come over to expenses and click to reveal the definition for expenses. If you want them to go away, please note that there is an X in the corner of both if you wanted them off your screen for any particular reason. Let students know that while in fact they do earn so much an hour at a job, let's say $15 an hour, or they might earn an annual salary, they shouldn't actually expect to receive the amount due to things such as taxes and other deductions. Emphasize this is important because they need to consider that when they're applying for jobs within the next few years. After talking about deductions and using the prompts on the screen, please make sure that you select option 3 or the piggy bank to proceed to the next part of your lesson. JA of South Dakota is only doing the financial literacy track of the program this year. If you mistakenly click on the incorrect button, use the menu on the top left-hand side of the screen to navigate to the correct slide. So again, either I'm going to select option 3, which is the image of the piggy bank, which represents the financial literacy portion of the lesson. Or if I make a mistake and I need to navigate, I can also expand my menu by going to the top left-hand side and clicking, and then you can see the titles of all of the slides. So if you know where you're going, this is a great option for you as well. To minimize this, I'm just going to click on the 3 lines. And there we go. So I'm going to select option 3, and we are going to be moving on to talking about planning for expenses. Again, we have another prompt or 2 that we're going to talk about with the students. And then from here, if you have not done so already, please hand out the student worksheet. Students begin on the side that is titled Rio's Paycheck Pie Chart. Students will take notes by copying percentages and the bullet points under each of the categories while you go through each of the parts of the chart. Please give students some time to write the notes on their worksheet while you're talking and telling students about the different sections. And please note that they do still need to, please emphasize that the students do need to write the percentages on the chart on their worksheet as well before moving on, and just give them a few seconds. Again, at the middle school level, students are still working on taking notes as a skill, so it might just take them a little bit longer. They can also maybe pick, if they're struggling to keep up, maybe they just pick 1 or 2 of the bullet points from the other purchases and the living expenses to kind of help them speed up as well. Once you're done with that, you're going to move on to problem solving within budgets. So as you keep going, you're going to reach Rio's emergency. So she has a budgeting emergency. Her car needs repairs, but it's going to cost money. So what you're going to do is you're going to pose this question to the students, and this would be a great option for them to think about it for a few seconds and then give them the option to turn and talk to a neighbor or 2 neighbors about what they think they should do. Remind them that they do have Rio's paycheck in front of them, so where all the money is going, and tell them that they need to come up with a solution for finding the money in their budget to pay for this car repair. So they could just tell you what category from the budget it will come from. Have a couple students share, especially if you have a couple different solutions, and just ask students why they picked that solution and if it was a good pick. And again, the positive solution is, of course, pulling from the savings portion of the budget, and remind students that that is what the purpose of a savings account is for. As we move on, we're going to keep reiterating the idea that saving is important and that we should plan to save rather than just like spend all our money and then figure out what's left. Planning to save, we often call it paying yourself first. And so you're going to cover that with students. If you have a great saving strategy, this would be a time to bring it up with students. What works well for you, maybe in the past has something not worked well. This is a great chance to just share your personal or professional experience if you happen to be in the banking industry. All right, and as we move on, once again, after going through the discussion questions on the slide, please just make sure to select option 3 to move on to the correct portion of the presentation. And then you're now going to move on to the changing money activity, which is found on the back side of the student worksheet. Students will need to label their pie chart with the dollar amount of each category. They may need help with some of the calculations, but please give them time to work out the math if they are able to do so. You may even suggest that they work with someone sitting close to them, or you could also potentially do the math as a whole group using the whiteboard in the classroom. From there, answer the questions at the bottom of the worksheet and have students discuss these. After this, you are going to wrap up the session by reviewing the main ideas from the lesson, and then you're going to utilize the last slide to review some of the big ideas. Again, we just did the financial literacy piece, so you only have to do the big ideas for financial literacy. You just get past the slide that has the work and career readiness big ideas. Those do not apply to your lesson. And then, of course, we come to our reflection questions at the end. If you have time, it's great to discuss all 3, but if you're short on time, just pick one that you feel strongly about. And with that, that brings you to the end of this session, my income and expenses. If this is part of your JA in a day or JA in the AM program, please continue to the next lesson if applicable. Consider allowing those students a quick stretch break while you get the next lesson ready and pulled up. If this is your only lesson of the day and you have more to teach at a later date, please make sure to collect student name tents as they will be reused for your next lesson.